Trevor, a man whose entire identity was chiseled into the hard planes of his muscles and the sharp confidence of his voice, stood in the center of the living room Liam had designed. He saw Liam as just another fixture in the house, soft, functional, and ultimately replaceable. The challenge hung in the air, thick and acrid like smoke. "My dojo, Saturday at noon. We settle this." He didn't say what this was, but they all knew. It was a contest for dominance, for the house, for Sarah. Trevor, the karate champion, saw an architect who spent his days hunched over blueprints, a man whose hands were stained with graphite, not blood. He saw a quiet, passive man he had been systematically humiliating for 3 months. He did not see the man who had held a defensive line for 36 hours in the dust-choked ruins of a forgotten Fallujah outpost. He did not see the cold, unblinking calm of a Marine who had faced down threats far more real than a puffed-up martial artist in a suburban living room. Within 5 days, Trevor's world, so carefully constructed on a foundation of perceived strength, would be dismantled piece by piece, not by a fist, but by a truth he never imagined existed. It's a powerful story, isn't it? The kind that makes you wonder what secrets the quiet people in your own life might be holding. I'd love to know where you're watching from today, so drop a comment and let me know. And if you enjoy seeing arrogance meet its match, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories of quiet strength and ultimate vindication. Now let's get back to how it all began. The beginning of the end started not with a bang, but with the subtle, grating sound of a key in the front door that wasn't Sarah's alone. Liam was in his study, the one room in the house that was entirely his, surrounded by the scent of old books and drafting paper. The lines on the blueprint before him were clean, precise, governed by the laws of physics and aesthetics. His life, he had once believed, was built on a similar foundation. He heard Sarah's laugh, a little too bright, a little too loud, followed by a deeper, more resonant male voice that vibrated with an unearned sense of ownership. Liam closed his eyes for a moment. He had known this was coming. The late nights, the vague excuses, the scent of a cologne that wasn't his clinging to her clothes. They were all leading to this moment, the formal introduction of his replacement. He rose from his chair, his movements deliberate. He was not a large man, not in the way Trevor would later prove to be. His was a lean, wiry strength, honed not in a gym with polished mirrors, but in the unforgiving crucible of desert deployments. He walked out of the study and into the great room, the heart of the home he had not only designed, but helped build with his own hands. The soaring ceiling, the wall of glass overlooking the oak-filled yard, the seamless flow of space, it was a testament to his vision, his patience. And standing in the middle of it, with his arm draped possessively around Sarah's shoulders, was Trevor. Trevor was everything Liam was not. He was broad-shouldered, with a thick neck and a jaw that seemed permanently clenched. He wore a tight-fitting polo shirt that served as a billboard for the hours he spent sculpting his physique. His smile was wide and predatory, and it faltered for only a fraction of a second when he saw Liam. It was a flicker of surprise, as if he hadn't expected the husband to actually be home, a minor inconvenience in his triumphant arrival. "Oh, Liam," Sarah said, her voice strained. She detached herself from Trevor's side, a half-step of separation that did nothing to erase the intimacy. "You're home early. This is Trevor." Trevor extended a hand, his grip a test of strength Liam had no interest in taking. Liam met it with a firm but neutral pressure. "Liam," he said, his voice even. "Heard a lot about you," Trevor said, though his tone suggested none of it was good. He scanned the room, his eyes moving over the custom-built bookshelves, the carefully chosen furniture, the art on the walls. It wasn't a look of appreciation. It was an appraisal, like a potential buyer inspecting a property for its flaws. "Nice place. A little sterile, maybe? Needs more energy." He clapped his hands together, a sharp, explosive sound that echoed in the high-ceiling space. Needs life. Liam felt Sarah's gaze on him, a silent plea for him to be civil, to not make a scene. It was a look he was becoming accustomed to. She was the silent enabler, the one who would stand by and watch the slow erosion of his dignity for the sake of her own comfort. I designed it for calm, Liam replied, his voice quiet but carrying. Energy is easy, calm is difficult. Trevor let out a short, barking laugh. Spoken like a true architect. Me? I'm a man of action. I run a dojo downtown. Elite karate. We teach discipline, strength, real-world stuff. He looked from Liam's plain button-down shirt to his soft-looking hands. You know how to handle yourself. The implication was clear. Liam simply nodded, a gesture of acknowledgement, not agreement. He saw the whole dynamic laid out before him like one of his blueprints. Trevor, the aggressor, needing to establish physical dominance. Sarah, the facilitator, caught between her past and her future, choosing the path of least resistance. And himself, the obstacle to be removed. He felt a familiar coldness settle in his gut, the same calm focus he'd felt on long, silent patrols when every shadow could hold a threat. He was being sized up, tested. They thought the battle would be fought on Trevor's terms, a physical contest of noise and aggression. They had no idea the war had already been decided, years ago, in a lawyer's office when Liam had structured his assets with the same meticulous care he used to design a load-bearing wall. He had prepared for every contingency, including this one. That first night was a masterclass in condescension. Trevor held court at the dinner table Liam had built from a single slab of reclaimed walnut. He talked about his championships, the trophies that lined his dojo walls, the weakness he saw in modern men. We've become a society of thinkers, not doers, he declared, gesturing with a fork he held like a weapon. Men who sit behind desks, pushing pencils, losing touch with their primal selves. He glanced at Liam. No offense, of course. None taken, Liam said, carefully cutting his steak. He was interested in the performance. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance was fascinating in its own way. It was a caricature of strength, a hollow shell. Trevor's power was external, built on the admiration of his students and the validation of weaker people. It required an audience. Liam's strength was internal, forged in silence and solitude. It required nothing. Sarah, to her credit, tried to steer the conversation. Liam is a very respected architect, she offered, as if defending him. He's won awards. Trevor waved a dismissive hand. Awards are just opinions. Trophies are earned. In the ring, there's no opinion. There's a winner and a loser. It's pure. He then turned the conversation to the house itself, a topic he seemed to believe he was uniquely qualified to discuss. You know, I was looking at the entryway. The lines are all very sharp, very aggressive. A martial artist would tell you that creates bad energy flow. You want softer curves, a more welcoming chi. Liam almost smiled. He had spent 2 years studying historical Japanese architecture, the principles of Ma and Shake, the interplay of space and nature. He had designed the entryway to draw a visitor's eye through the house towards the view of the ancient oak in the backyard, creating a sense of journey and tranquility. To have it critiqued in terms of bad energy by a man whose entire being was a monument to aggressive posturing was an irony so rich it was almost delicious. It's based on principles of prospect and refuge, Liam said calmly. The tight entryway makes the expansive view from the great room more impactful. It's a deliberate compression and release. Trevor stared at him, a flicker of confusion in his eyes before the mask of superiority snapped back into place. Right, compression and release. Sounds technical. He smirked at Sarah. I just call it a cramped hallway. Sarah laughed. It was a small, nervous sound, but it was a laugh. It was a betrayal in miniature. In that moment, she had chosen. She had allied herself with the loud, simple narrative of the aggressor over the quiet, complex truth of the man she had married. Liam registered the laugh, filed it away. It was another piece of data, another line item in the growing list of grievances he kept locked away in the most fortified part of his mind. Throughout the dinner, he remained a quiet observer. He watched as Trevor subtly asserted his presence in the home. He moved a coaster, adjusted a cushion on the sofa, spoke of changes he would make as if his residency were a foregone conclusion. "We should get a proper gym set up in the garage," he said, looking at Liam. "You could use it, build some upper body strength." Liam thought of the endless pull-ups on a scorching bar in the desert, the forced marches with 100 pounds of gear, the muscle memory that still lived in his hands and shoulders. He thought of the weight of a fallen comrade, a burden far heavier than any dumbbell. "I prefer running," he said simply. The evening ended with Liam retreating to his study. He didn't work. He sat in the dark, looking out the window at the silhouette of the oak tree against the night sky. He wasn't angry. Anger was a hot, messy emotion, and he had been trained to be cold, efficient. What he felt was a profound sense of disappointment and a grim, stealing resolve. The structure of his marriage had failed. The foundation had been eroded by neglect and deceit. Now it was time for a controlled demolition. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a simple, thick manila envelope, held shut by a red string wound around 2 cardboard circles. It contained his prenuptial agreement, the deed to the house, and a detailed accounting of his personal assets and investments, all drafted and notarized before he had ever said, "I do." He ran a finger over the smooth paper. It was his symbolic object, the physical manifestation of his foresight. This envelope was the quiet truth that would, when the time was right, roar louder than all of Trevor's empty boasts. The humiliations escalated over the next few weeks, each one a calculated test of Liam's passivity. The next major incident occurred at a summer barbecue hosted by Sarah's parents. It was their anniversary, a gathering of family and friends in a manicured backyard that felt a world away from the architectural honesty of Liam's home. Sarah's parents, David and Carol, had always been polite but distant with Liam. They had wanted a doctor or a lawyer for their daughter, and an architect, no matter how successful, felt somehow less tangible to them. They were, however, utterly captivated by Trevor. David, a retired sales executive who valued a firm handshake and a confident pitch, was hanging on Trevor's every word. Trevor was telling a story about disarming a supposed mugger outside his dojo, a tale that grew more heroic with each retelling. Liam, standing by the grill and methodically flipping burgers, could hear the embellishments piling up like layers of cheap lacquer. "So the guy comes at me with a knife, right? Big guy, crazy eyes," Trevor narrated, his hands illustrating the scene. "And I just centered myself, found my breath, and then, bam!" He clapped his hands for effect. Wrist lock, pressure point to the shoulder, and the knife is on the ground before he even knows what happened. The key is to use their aggression against them, to remain the calm center of the storm. Liam suppressed a sigh. He knew the AAR, the after-action report, on that incident from a police officer friend. The mugger was a homeless man, mentally unwell and holding a butter knife. Trevor had thrown him to the ground with enough force to dislocate the man's shoulder, an act of excessive force that the responding officers had noted with disapproval. But in Trevor's telling, he was a hero, a guardian of the peace. Later, as dessert was being served, Trevor decided it was time for a demonstration. He gathered a small audience, including Sarah's younger cousins, who looked at him with wide, impressionable eyes. "People think martial arts is all about kicking and punching," he announced, beckoning to a nervous-looking Liam. "But it's really about control. Here, Liam, stand here." Liam felt a dozen pairs of eyes on him. He saw Sarah, a slice of cake halfway to her mouth, her expression a mixture of anxiety and morbid curiosity. She did not intervene. He walked over, his face a mask of neutrality. "Now, let's say someone grabs you in a bear hug from behind," Trevor said, positioning himself behind Liam. "Most people panic. They try to thrash, to use brute force." He wrapped his thick arms around Liam's chest, squeezing with theatrical effort. "See? He's trapped. What do you do, Liam?" Liam did nothing. He stood perfectly still, his body relaxed. He could feel the pulse in Trevor's neck against his back. He could identify at least 5 ways to break the hold, 3 of them ending with Trevor unconscious on the grass. One particularly efficient MCMAP technique involved driving his head back to shatter Trevor's nose, followed by a disabling strike to the groin. But that was not the plan. The plan was patience. The plan was strategy. "See, he doesn't know what to do," Trevor said, his voice smug. He was speaking to the crowd, but the humiliation was aimed directly at Liam. But a trained person knows it's all about leverage. With a grunt, Trevor dropped his weight, hooked a leg behind Liam's, and sent him tumbling to the ground. It wasn't a violent fall. Trevor controlled it to make himself look masterful, not brutal, but it was utterly debasing. Liam landed on the soft grass with a thud, the laughter of the cousins and the polite chuckles of the adults washing over him. Trevor stood over him, arms crossed, a triumphant grin on his face. "It's that simple," Trevor said, offering a hand to help Liam up. Liam ignored the hand and rose to his feet on his own, brushing blades of grass from his pants. He looked at Trevor, his eyes holding no anger, no shame. He simply looked. It was a look that unsettled Trevor for a moment, a gaze too calm, too assessing. Then he saw Sarah rushing to his side, not Liam's. "Are you okay?" she asked Trevor, fussing over him as if he were the one who had fallen. "You were so quick." "He's fine," Trevor said, patting her arm, just showing how technique always beats raw strength. Or in this case, he added with a wink at David, no strength at all. The rest of the party was a blur of sympathetic looks from strangers and the pointed silence of Sarah's family. Liam retreated into himself, becoming an observer once more. He noted the way Sarah's hand lingered on Trevor's back, the way her father clapped Trevor on the shoulder, welcoming him into the family in a way he had never welcomed Liam. He was being written out of his own life, and the authors of this new draft were celebrating their work right in front of him. That night, back in the quiet sanctuary of his house, the silence was different. It was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. Sarah finally addressed the incident, but not in the way a wife should. "You have to admit, it was pretty impressive," she said, applying lotion to her arms, her back to him. "The way he just took you down. He's very protective." Liam stopped in the doorway of their bedroom. "He humiliated me, Sarah, in front of your entire family." She finally turned, her face a mask of frustration. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It was a party trick. Trevor was just having fun. Why do you always have to be so serious, so sensitive?" There it was, the blame shift. His reaction was the problem, not the action itself. His demand for basic respect was an inconvenience. "So I'm supposed to enjoy being thrown to the ground in front of a crowd?" "It wouldn't be a big deal if you didn't make it one," she shot back, her voice rising. "God, Liam, this is why I can't talk to you anymore. You live in your own little world, with your books and your drawings. Trevor lives in the real world. He's passionate. He's alive. Maybe you could learn something from him." That was the line. Not just a crack in the foundation, but a gaping chasm. She didn't see the man he was. She saw a caricature drawn by Trevor, a weak, sensitive intellectual. She had no interest in the truth. She was in love with a fantasy, a cartoon of hyper-masculinity, and she was blind to the quiet, steady strength of the man who had built her a home and a life. "Maybe I could," Liam said, his voice dangerously quiet. He turned and walked back to his study, the door clicking shut behind him with a soft finality. He didn't open the manila envelope that night. He didn't need to. He knew its contents by heart. Instead, he opened his laptop and began composing an email to a woman named Catherine Albright, a partner at the city's most formidable family law firm. The subject line was simple: consultation. The war was entering a new phase. The quiet preparation was over. It was time to start positioning his pieces on the board for the final confrontation. The catalyst, when it came, was not about pride or public humiliation. It was about the house. It was always, fundamentally, about the house. For Sarah and Trevor, it was a commodity, a high-value asset to be liquidated. For Liam, it was a sanctuary, a living piece of his soul rendered in wood, glass, and stone. The conversation happened a week after the disastrous barbecue. Liam was working at the large dining table, reviewing structural plans for a new city library project, when Sarah and Trevor walked in. They had the air of a team that had been rehearsing their lines. Sarah, predictably, was the designated speaker. Trevor stood behind her, a silent enforcer, his arms crossed over his chest. "Liam, we need to talk," Sarah began, her voice brittle with forced confidence. Liam didn't look up from his plans immediately. He deliberately made a small, precise notation in the margin, with a red pen before setting it down and giving her his full attention. This small act of control, of finishing his thought before acknowledging hers, was not lost on them. It was a subtle rejection of their manufactured urgency. "I'm listening." "Trevor and I have been talking about the future," she said, glancing back at her partner for reassurance. "We're serious about building a life together. We want to buy a place of our own, maybe even start a business. A high-end wellness center. His expertise, my support." Liam remained silent, his expression unreadable. He let her continue, let her lay out the entire ill-conceived plan. "The thing is," she said, finally getting to the point, "we need capital. And this house, it's worth a fortune. We had it informally appraised. It's our biggest asset." The word "our" hung in the air, a stunning display of audacity. Liam's gaze flickered from her to Trevor. He saw the greed in Trevor's eyes, the hungry look of a man who saw a winning lottery ticket and was impatient to cash it. "We want to sell the house, Liam," Sarah stated flatly. "We'll split the proceeds, of course, 50-50. It's the fair thing to do. That will give you plenty to get a new place, and it will give us the seed money we need to get started." Liam took a slow breath. He looked around the great room, at the way the afternoon light filtered through the leaves of the oak tree, casting shifting patterns on the polished concrete floor. He looked at the fireplace, which he had faced with stones he'd collected himself from a riverbed upstate. Every joint, every angle, every material in this house was a decision he had made, a memory he had embedded. "No," he said. The word was not loud, but it was absolute. It was a solid, immovable object placed directly in their path. Sarah's composure cracked. "What do you mean, no? You can't just say no. It's a marital asset. I am entitled to half of it." "That's where you're mistaken," Liam said, his voice still level. Trevor, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. The enforcer was being called into action. "Listen, pal," he said, his voice a low growl. "She's being more than fair. You're not living here together anymore. It's time to be a man, cut your losses, and move on. Don't make this difficult." "This isn't your concern," Liam said, his eyes locked on Trevor's. He did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. There was a cold authority in his tone that gave Trevor a moment's pause. "Anything that affects Sarah affects me now," Trevor shot back, recovering his bravado. "And I'm not going to let you stand in the way of her happiness or our future just because you're bitter." "The house is not for sale," Liam repeated, turning his attention back to Sarah, dismissing Trevor as if he were a buzzing insect. "And you are not entitled to half of it. I suggest you consult a lawyer. They will explain the legal realities to you." Sarah's face contorted with rage. All pretense of civility vanished. "A lawyer? I don't need a lawyer to tell me what I'm owed. I was your wife for 7 years, Liam. I supported you while you were building your precious career. I hosted your boring client dinners. I put up with your moods and your silences. This house is as much mine as it is yours." This was the list of grievances from her side, a desperate attempt to create a narrative of sacrifice. Liam listened patiently. He thought of the inheritance from his grandfather, a man who had built a small fortune from nothing, that had funded the land purchase and construction before they were even married. He thought of the trust fund he'd used to pay off her staggering student loan debt and the 2 failed boutique businesses she had started and abandoned. He thought of the endless emotional support he had provided, listening to her anxieties and ambitions, which he had always encouraged. Her version of history was a work of fiction. "Your support has been noted, Sarah," he said, the cold formality of his words like a splash of icy water. "Nevertheless, the legal status of this property is not up for debate. It is not a marital asset under the terms of our prenuptial agreement." The mention of the prenup landed with a thud. Sarah's face went pale. It was a document she had signed with a laugh, calling it an unromantic but necessary evil, never believing it would actually be invoked. She had clearly forgotten its specific, ironclad clauses regarding premarital assets and inheritances. The prenup," she stammered. "That was just a formality. No judge would take that seriously after all this time." "Again, I suggest you seek legal counsel," Liam said. He began to gather his blueprints, a clear signal that the conversation was over. This was when Trevor lost control. His primary tool, physical intimidation, was useless against legal and financial fortifications he didn't understand. His frustration boiled over into pure, primal aggression. He slapped his hand down on the table, a loud crack that made Sarah jump. The blueprints scattered. "Enough of this lawyer talk," he boomed. "You're hiding behind paperwork like a coward. You want to be difficult? Fine. Let's settle this like men. No lawyers, no paperwork, just you and me." Liam looked at the scattered plans, his designs for the new library, a place of quiet knowledge, now in disarray because of this loud, ignorant man. He looked up at Trevor, his face a mask of fury. "My dojo," Trevor declared, his chest puffed out. "Saturday at noon. If I win, you sign whatever papers are necessary to sell the house and give Sarah her half. No more arguments." "And if I win?" Liam asked, his voice dangerously soft. Trevor laughed, a loud, contemptuous sound. "If you win? Well, let's be realistic. That's not going to happen. But sure, if by some miracle you win, we'll walk away. We'll leave you alone in your precious glass box." He saw it as an impossible outcome, a throwaway concession. Liam looked from Trevor's sneering face to Sarah's. She was watching him, her expression not of concern for his safety, but of eager anticipation. She wanted this. She wanted to see him broken, to have his defeat validate her choice. She was sanctioning this primal contest for her future. She was a willing prize. A profound, clarifying calm washed over Liam. All the small betrayals, the months of condescension, the public humiliations, they all coalesced into this single, pivotal moment. This was not a negotiation. It was a challenge, and it was one he would accept, not on their terms, but on his. He stood up, his movements fluid and unhurried. He met Trevor's glare without flinching. "Okay," Liam said. The single word was so quiet, so devoid of the anger or fear Trevor had expected, that it threw him off balance. "Okay?" Trevor repeated, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "Yes, okay," Liam confirmed. "Your dojo, Saturday, noon." He then bent down, methodically gathered his scattered blueprints, stacked them into a neat pile, and tucked them under his arm. He walked past them without another word, heading back to the sanctuary of his study. He left them standing in the middle of his living room, Trevor flushed with triumph and Sarah looking relieved and excited. They thought they had finally cornered him. They thought they had forced him onto their battlefield. They had no idea he was leading them into his. The 5 days leading up to Saturday were a study in contrasts. For Trevor, they were a public relations tour. He told everyone at his dojo about the upcoming sparring match. He framed it as a lesson in humility he was being forced to teach his girlfriend's stubborn ex. He basked in the admiration of his students, who saw him as a modern-day samurai defending his lady's honor. He spent his evenings with Sarah, planning their future, spending the money from the house sale in their minds. His confidence was a massive, glittering edifice, built on a foundation of pure ego. He was a champion. Liam was an architect. The outcome was preordained. For Liam, the days were methodical, precise, and quiet. He did not go to a gym. He did not watch fighting videos on the internet. He did not alter his routine. He went to work at his firm, Hawthorne and Sterling, where a key detail unknown to Sarah was that his name was the Hawthorne. He wasn't just an employee, he was the senior founding partner, a man who commanded the respect of the city's most powerful developers and politicians. He finalized the structural plans for the new library. He met with the City Planning Commission. He moved multi-million-dollar projects forward with a calm, decisive hand. In the evenings, he returned to his quiet house. He ate simple meals. He read. He spoke on the phone twice, in long, detailed conversations with Catherine Albright. They were not discussing fight strategies. They were finalizing a different kind of attack, one based on depositions, financial records, and legal precedent. They were preparing a kill box made of paper. On Wednesday evening, he went into the garage. It was a clean, organized space, like every other part of his house. Tucked away in a corner, under a simple canvas dust cover, was a heavy bag. It was not a sleek, modern piece of gym equipment, but a battered, old-fashioned canvas cylinder, stained with sweat and time. He hadn't touched it in years. He unwrapped his hands with black athletic tape, the movements automatic, a ritual resurrected from a past life. He didn't practice kicks or fancy combinations. He just stood before the bag and began to throw punches. They weren't the flashy, snapping strikes of a sport martial artist. They were short, brutal, economical movements. Left jab, right cross, hook to the body. Each one landed with a sickening thud that was absorbed by the sheer mass of the bag. There was no wasted motion. It was the CQC, the close quarters combat training of the Marine Corps, a system designed not for points, but for incapacitation. He wasn't training for a match. He was simply waking up the muscle memory, reminding his body of a language it had once spoken fluently. After 20 minutes breathing steadily, a light sheen of sweat on his brow, he stopped. He recovered the bag, unwrapped his hands, and went back inside. The check was complete. The system was still online. On Friday night, Sarah called him. It was the first time they had spoken since the challenge was issued. "Liam, I just wanted to see how you were," she said, her voice hesitant. It was a token gesture of concern, a box to be checked so she could tell herself she had done the right thing. "I'm fine, Sarah," he replied, his tone giving nothing away. Are you really going to do this? Go to the dojo?" An agreement was made, he said. There was a pause. He could hear Trevor's voice in the background, muffled but audible. "What's he saying? Is he trying to back out?" "No, he's not backing out," she said, her voice turning firm again, her brief moment of concern evaporating. "Look, Liam, just be smart about this. Don't get hurt. Just tap out early. There's no shame in it. Trevor is a professional. Just accept the deal and we can all move on without any more drama." She was coaching him on how to lose gracefully. The condescension was breathtaking. "I appreciate the advice, Sarah," he said, and the line went dead. He stood there for a moment, the phone in his hand. That was it. That was the final piece of confirmation he needed. There was no lingering affection, no concern for his well-being. There was only her own self-interest. She wanted the path to her new life cleared with minimal fuss. His potential injury was just an administrative detail to be managed. He went to his closet and pulled out a simple gym bag. He packed a pair of gray sweatpants, a plain black t-shirt, and a bottle of water. Then he went to his study. He opened the manila envelope. He took out the documents, reviewed them one last time, and placed them into a sleek, professional leather briefcase. He added several other files that Miss Albright had couriered over that afternoon. The briefcase was now far heavier, far more dangerous than the gym bag. He closed it, the latches clicking shut with a sound of utter finality. The quiet before the storm was over. Saturday arrived, a bright, cloudless summer day. Liam drove his unassuming sedan, a practical vehicle he favored for its reliability, not its flash. He did not drive to the dojo. He drove to a small, quiet coffee shop 3 blocks away. At 11:45 a.m., Catherine Albright walked in. She was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of unflappable competence. She wore a tailored business suit that was as much a piece of armor as Trevor's black belt. "Liam," she said, shaking his hand, "everything is ready." "Thank you for coming, Catherine," he said. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," she replied, a rare thin smile on her lips. "It's not often I get to see a case resolved with this much theatricality. Most of my work involves shouting matches in sterile conference rooms." "I believe in choosing the right tool for the job," Liam said, "and in this case, the venue is part of the message." They walked the 3 blocks to the dojo. Elite Karate was located in a renovated warehouse space. Inside, the walls were painted a stark white and adorned with Japanese calligraphy and photos of Trevor in various heroic poses. About 15 of Trevor's students, mostly young men and teenagers, were seated on benches along one wall. They were the audience, assembled to witness their master's triumph. Sarah was there, sitting in the front row, looking nervous but excited. And in the center of the large matted area, Trevor stood waiting. He was wearing a crisp black gi, his black belt tied neatly around his waist. He was barefoot, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet, radiating energy and aggression. He looked powerful, dominant, the king in his court. When Liam walked in wearing his simple sweatpants and t-shirt and carrying a briefcase, a ripple of confusion went through the room. Trevor's smirk was wide. "Lose the suit, pal?" he called out, gesturing to Ms. Albright. "And what's with the briefcase? Did you bring your homework?" The student snickered. Liam ignored him. He walked to the edge of the mat, placed the briefcase down carefully, and turned to face Trevor. Ms. Albright stood just behind him, a silent, imposing figure. "I'm here, Trevor," Liam said, his voice calm and clear, easily carrying through the large space. "As we agreed." "Good," Trevor said, cracking his neck. "I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve. Let's get this over with. I have plans for the rest of my day." He gestured for Liam to come onto the mat. Liam held up a hand, a simple gesture that halted everything. "Before we begin," he said, "you stated that if I win, you and Sarah walk away. And if you win, I agree to sell the house and split the proceeds." "That's the deal," Trevor confirmed impatiently. "Are we going to talk, or are we going to fight?" "We need to clarify the terms," Liam said, "because the premise of your offer is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. A misunderstanding I am here to correct." He turned, took the briefcase, and placed it on the mat in front of him. He clicked open the latches. The sound echoed in the now silent room. Sarah was frowning, confused. Trevor's smirk had faded, replaced by a look of irritation. This was not following his script. "You believe," Liam began, his voice taking on the precise, authoritative tone of a man presenting irrefutable evidence, "that this house is a marital asset. You believe that Sarah is entitled to 50% of its value. You believe that winning this physical contest will grant you access to that capital." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You are wrong on all counts." He reached into the briefcase and pulled out the first document. It was the prenuptial agreement. This is the agreement Sarah and I both signed a week before our wedding. Catherine, my lawyer, he gestured to Miss Albright, whose presence suddenly took on a new, ominous weight, can attest to its validity as her firm drafted it. He then pulled out a second, thicker document. This is the deed to the property on which the house stands, along with the bank statements showing the source of funds for the land purchase. The land was purchased by me, using funds from a trust established by my grandfather 2 years before I married Sarah. As per Section 4, Paragraph B of the prenuptial agreement, all premarital assets and any assets derived from them remain the sole property of the individual. He continued, his voice relentless. Each document he produced another nail in the coffin of their plan. These are the architectural plans, filed with the city under my name and my firm's name only. These are the construction invoices, all paid from the same premarital trust account. The house itself, therefore, is not a marital asset. It is an improvement upon a pre-existing, non-marital asset, and as such it remains my sole and separate property. Sarah had gone deathly pale. She was staring at the pile of paper as if it were a snake. Liam, no, we agreed that was just in case things got messy. Things are messy, Sarah, Liam said, his gaze finally flicking to her. For the first time she saw not the quiet, passive man she had taken for granted, but a stranger, a cold, calculating strategist who had been 10 steps ahead of her all along. Trevor was looking back and forth between Liam and Sarah, his brain struggling to process this new information. The financial details were beyond his comprehension, but he understood one thing. The money was slipping through his fingers. "This is garbage," he blustered, taking a step forward. "A bunch of legal mumbo-jumbo. We made a deal, man to man." "Our deal had a false premise," Liam countered smoothly. "You can't win a prize that was never on the table. The house is not, and never will be, for sale. You have no claim to it. Sarah has no claim to it. Your entire challenge is meaningless." He wasn't done. He reached back into the briefcase. The list of grievances was about to be made public. "Furthermore," he said, his voice dropping slightly, drawing everyone in, "while we're clearing up misunderstandings, let's talk about Sarah's financial standing." He produced a new set of folders. This file contains the financial records for Sarah's two failed business ventures, the boutique clothing store and the artisan candle company. Both were funded by interest-free loans from my personal accounts, totaling $142,000. These loans were never repaid. He held up another file. "This is the documentation for the $25,000 payment I made to pay off Sarah's parents' second mortgage, a debt they incurred and were unable to service. A gift which I do not regret, but which illustrates a pattern of financial dependency." He held up a final, slim folder. "And these are the credit card statements from the last 6 months, showing hotel rooms, dinners, and gifts that correspond directly with the timeline of her relationship with you, Trevor, all paid for from a joint account funded exclusively by my income." He placed the final folder on the stack. "So you see, the situation is not what you thought. Sarah is not coming into this new life with you as a financial partner. She is coming with significant personal debt and a documented history of financial failure, which I had until now chosen to absorb. Her only asset was her perceived claim on my property, a claim which, as we have established, does not exist." The dojo was utterly silent. The students were no longer looking at Liam as a victim. They were looking at him with a mixture of awe and fear. They were looking at Trevor, their hero, whose face was a mask of disbelief and incandescent rage. And they were looking at Sarah, who was visibly trembling, her face buried in her hands. The public humiliation was not Liam's. It was hers, and it was Trevor's. Liam had not raised his voice. He had not thrown a single punch, but he had utterly destroyed them. He had taken their battlefield, the dojo, the place of physical strength, and turned it into a courtroom, where the only strength that mattered was the strength of his preparation and the power of the truth. The reversal was absolute. The air in the dojo, once charged with Trevor's aggressive confidence, was now thick with his humiliation. His students, who had gathered to see a physical victory, had instead witnessed a public vivisection. Their master, the champion, had been revealed as a greedy, foolish man, outmaneuvered by the quiet architect he had so casually dismissed. Trevor stared at the stack of documents on the mat. It was an altar upon which his ambitions had just been sacrificed. The color had drained from his face, replaced by a blotchy, furious red. His entire strategy, his entire identity, was built on the simple binary of winning and losing a physical fight. He had no tools for this. He was a hammer in a world that had suddenly become composed of water. You, you weasel, he finally spat, the words clumsy, robbed of their intended venom by the sheer shock of his defeat. You hide behind your money and your lawyers. You're a coward. No, Liam said, his voice calm and even. A coward is a man who preys on those he perceives as weaker. A coward is a man who needs an audience to feel strong. He gestured to the silent students. I didn't need an audience. You did. You brought them here to witness my humiliation. Instead, they are witnessing your foolishness. This was the moral mirror. Liam was reflecting Trevor's own behavior back at him, stripped of all its self-serving justifications. The truth of it was so undeniable that Trevor had no response. His fists clenched and unclenched at his sides. His programming was screaming at him to resort to the only language he truly understood: violence. Liam saw the shift in Trevor's eyes, the moment the last vestiges of rational thought were consumed by pure rage. He had anticipated this too. The legal proceedings are concluded, Liam said, turning to Ms. Albright, but I believe Mr. Kincaid still feels our agreement is unresolved. He began to take off his shoes, placing them neatly beside the mat. He stepped onto the matted floor, his movements deliberate. He was no longer the architect, the lawyer's client. A different man was emerging, a man of chilling stillness. You wanted a fight, Trevor, Liam said, his voice dropping to a low conversational tone. You wanted to settle this like men. I have settled the legal and financial aspects, but if you still feel the need for a physical resolution, I will not deny you that. This was not what Trevor expected. He had anticipated begging, more legal talk, anything but this quiet, calm acceptance. It was a bluff, he thought. It had to be a bluff. You think you can stand in a ring with me? Trevor snarled, his confidence surging back, a drowning man grasping at a familiar log. I'll break you in half. That is your right to try, Liam said. He stood in the center of the mat, his posture relaxed, his hands at his sides. He was a living embodiment of the calm he had designed his house to evoke. Trevor let out a roar, a theatrical sound meant to intimidate, and lunged. It wasn't a technique. It was a clumsy, rage-fueled rush. He threw a wild haymaker, a punch that would have knocked a normal man unconscious. Liam didn't back away. He didn't even flinch. At the last possible second, he moved. It was a small, economical motion. He swayed just enough for the punch to whistle past his ear, and as Trevor's momentum carried him forward, Liam's hand came up. He didn't strike. He simply placed his open palm on Trevor's chest and pushed. At the same time, his foot hooked behind Trevor's ankle. It was a simple, elegant principle of physics and leverage. Trevor's own forward momentum became his undoing. His feet tangled, his balance vanished, and the karate champion, the man of action, crashed to the mat with a heavy, undignified thud. He landed flat on his back, the wind knocked out of him. The students gasped. Sarah let out a small, strangled cry. Liam stood over him, unmoved. Get up, he said. It wasn't a taunt, it was an instruction. Gasping for breath, his face a mask of fury and shame, Trevor scrambled to his feet. He came at Liam again, this time with a flurry of kicks and punches, the kind of flashy combination that looked impressive in a demonstration. Liam didn't try to block them. He simply moved, weaving and parrying, his body a study in fluid efficiency. He made Trevor miss every single strike. He was a ghost, untouched, untouchable. Trevor, in contrast, was becoming increasingly frantic, his movements sloppy, his breathing ragged. He was punching at air, kicking at shadows. Finally, Trevor overextended on a spinning kick, a move designed for show. As he spun off balance, Liam stepped in. This time it wasn't a gentle push. He moved with a speed that was terrifying in its precision. He caught Trevor's arm, twisted it behind his back in a textbook armbar, and swept his legs out from under him. Trevor hit the mat again, this time with a cry of pain as his shoulder joint was pushed to its limit. Liam knelt beside him, applying just enough pressure to the joint to create excruciating pain without causing permanent injury. He leaned in close, his voice a low whisper for Trevor's ears only. "This is MCMAP," he said, the acronym meaning nothing to Trevor, but carrying the weight of a world he couldn't imagine. Marine Corps Martial Arts Program. It's not a sport. There are no points. There are no trophies. The only objective is to end the confrontation as quickly and efficiently as possible. I could have broken your arm. I could have dislocated your shoulder. I could have rendered you unconscious before you threw your first punch. He applied a fraction more pressure, and Trevor cried out again. "Do you understand?" Liam asked. "Do you understand the difference between a man who fights for a trophy and a man who has fought for his life? Do you yield?" "Yes, yes, I yield," Trevor gasped, his face pressed into the mat, the smell of his own sweat and failure filling his nostrils. Liam released him. He stood up, his breathing perfectly even. He had not broken a sweat. He looked down at the defeated man on the floor, the so-called champion, and felt nothing. No triumph, no anger, only a quiet, grim satisfaction. The matter was concluded. He turned and looked at Sarah. She was staring at him, her face a mess of tears and utter disbelief. The man she had dismissed as weak, sensitive, and soft had just dismantled her hero, physically and financially, without raising his voice or losing his composure. She was looking at a complete stranger. "The divorce papers were filed yesterday, Sarah," Liam said, his voice returning to its formal, distant tone. "Ms. Albright's office will be in contact with you regarding the logistics of retrieving your personal belongings from the house. You have 1 week." He walked over to the edge of the mat, put on his shoes, and picked up his briefcase. Ms. Albright, who had watched the entire exchange with a calm, professional demeanor, held the door for him. "Liam, wait!" Sarah cried, scrambling to her feet. She ran towards him, her hands outstretched. "Please, I didn't know. I'm sorry. We can fix this." Liam paused at the door but didn't turn around. "No, we can't," he said, his back to her. "A foundation can be repaired, Sarah, but this was never about a crack in the foundation. You bulldozed the entire structure to build something new with him. Now you can live in the rubble together." Without another word, he walked out into the bright afternoon sun, leaving behind the ruins of 2 lives he had not destroyed, but had simply exposed to the light of truth. The aftermath in the dojo was a scene of quiet devastation. The students, once a chorus of adulation for their master, now sat in stunned silence. They had come for a spectacle of strength and had received a lesson in humility, though not the one Trevor had intended to teach. Their hero had been laid low, not just physically, but morally and intellectually. The mystique was shattered. Trevor slowly pushed himself up from the mat. Every muscle ached, but the deepest pain was in his pride. He looked at his students, saw their wide, disillusioned eyes, and knew that his kingdom had crumbled. He was no longer a champion to them. He was a fool who had picked a fight with the wrong man. He looked at Sarah, who stood weeping by the door, her pleas echoing in the empty space where Liam had been. She was no longer a prize to be won. She was a liability, a partner in a failed and humiliating venture. "Get out," he rasped, his voice raw. "All of you, Get out! The students, grateful for the dismissal, scurried out of the dojo, whispering amongst themselves. The story of what had happened here would spread through their high schools, their social circles, and the local martial arts community like wildfire. Trevor's reputation was irreparable. He was left alone with Sarah. She turned to him, her face pleading. "Trevor, what are we going to do?" He looked at her with cold, empty eyes. The passion he had felt for her, the thrill of winning her away from her husband, had curdled into resentment. She was the cause of this. Her greed, her poor judgment, her failure to properly assess the man she was married to. "There is no we," he said, his voice flat. "Your husband was right. You bring nothing to the table. You're a financial black hole. I wanted a partner, not an anchor." "But I love you," she stammered, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "We were going to build a life together." "We were going to build a life on his money," Trevor corrected her brutally. "That money is gone. So are we." He walked past her, heading to his small office in the back. "Get your things and leave my dojo. I have enough problems without adding you to them." Sarah was left standing alone in the middle of the vast, empty room, the weight of her choices crashing down on her with the force of a physical blow. She had traded a man of quiet, hidden substance for a man of loud, hollow promises. She had gambled everything on the illusion of strength and had lost spectacularly. The life of comfort and security she had taken for granted was gone. The exciting new future she had dreamed of was a fantasy that had evaporated in the harsh light of reality. All she had left was the rubble Liam had spoken of. In the weeks that followed, the consequences continued to unfold with the precision of a controlled demolition. Catherine Albright's office was ruthlessly efficient. Sarah was given a date and a 2-hour window to retrieve her personal effects from the house. Liam was not present. He had arranged for a moving company to be there, along with a paralegal from Miss Albright's firm, to supervise and ensure she took only what was legally hers. She walked through the beautiful, sunlit rooms of the house, a ghost in her own former life, packing clothes and trinkets into boxes under the watchful, impersonal gaze of strangers. The house itself seemed to mock her, its calm, elegant spaces a testament to the man she had never truly seen. Her attempt to secure a favorable divorce settlement was a disaster. Ms. Albright presented the evidence of her adultery and her financial dependency with cold, irrefutable clarity. The prenuptial agreement held firm. The judge, a stern woman with little patience for infidelity or entitlement, awarded Sarah no alimony and no stake in any of Liam's assets. She left the marriage with her clothes, her car, which Liam had paid for but had put in her name, and the crushing weight of the debts she had accumulated. She was forced to move back in with her parents, into the small guest room of her childhood, a 35-year-old woman humbled and defeated. Her parents, who had once been so charmed by Trevor, now looked at her with a mixture of pity and disappointment. Trevor's downfall was just as swift. The story of the dojo showdown became a local legend, twisted and embellished with each telling, but the core facts remained the same. The karate champion had been humiliated by a quiet architect. His adult students, men who came to him for lessons in confidence and self-defense, began to drift away, unwilling to learn from a man who had been so thoroughly and publicly bested. The parents of his younger students, hearing whispers of his aggression and greed, pulled their children from his classes. Within 3 months, enrollment at elite karate had dropped by 70%. He was forced to downsize, moving from his impressive warehouse space to a small, dingy storefront in a less desirable part of town. The man who had preached about being a winner was now, by his own definition, a loser. Liam, meanwhile, moved through this period with the same quiet dignity he had displayed throughout the entire ordeal. He felt no joy in their ruin. His actions had not been born of a desire for revenge, but from a need for justice in peace. He had defended his property, his integrity, and his right to a life free from their toxicity. One evening, about a month after the dojo incident, his doorbell rang. He opened it to find an unexpected visitor, David, Sarah's father. The man who had been so easily impressed by Trevor's bravado now stood on Liam's doorstep looking old and weary. "Liam," he said, his voice hesitant, "can I have a word?" Liam stepped aside and let him in. He offered him a drink, which David declined. They stood in the great room, the same room where Trevor had first appraised the house and found it lacking. I came to apologize," David said, his eyes scanning the room, finally seeing its beauty, its strength. "I was a fool. I was taken in by that fraud. I encouraged Sarah. I belittled you, in my own way. I valued the wrong things, the loud talk, the big show. I didn't see the substance. I didn't see you." Liam listened, his expression neutral. "She's a mess, Liam," David continued, his voice cracking. "Living at home, no job, no prospects. She destroyed her life, and I helped her do it. I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what she lost, what we all lost." It was a confession, a plea for some kind of absolution. Liam considered the man before him. He saw not an antagonist, but a man who had been blinded by his own shallow values and who was now grappling with the consequences. "There's nothing for you to apologize for, David," Liam said, and he meant it. "You wanted the best for your daughter. Your judgment was clouded, mine was not. That's the only difference." He had no interest in kicking a man who was already down. His war was not with this sad, regretful old man. His war had been with arrogance and deceit, and it was over. "Thank you," David whispered. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You're a better man than she deserved, Liam. I hope you find some happiness." "I already have," Liam said, gesturing to the quiet, peaceful house around them. "I have this." After David left, Liam stood for a long time, looking out at the old oak tree. The battle was over. The consequences had been delivered. And now the long, quiet process of rebuilding could begin. The months that followed were a period of quiet reclamation. Liam's house, once a stage for tension and betrayal, slowly returned to being a sanctuary. The silence was no longer heavy with unspoken conflict. It was light, filled with the peaceful solitude of a man comfortable in his own skin and in his own space. He found himself working more from his home study, the creative energy flowing more freely than it had in years. The house, free of the bad energy Trevor had spoken of, seemed to breathe alongside him. He made one significant change. He converted the guest bedroom, the one Sarah had occupied in their final weeks together, into a small, personal gym. He installed the battered heavy bag from the garage, a few weights, and a simple bench. It wasn't for training, it was a reminder of the strength he carried within him, the discipline forged in a life she had never bothered to understand. It was a private monument to his own resilience. He reconnected with old friends, some of whom he had neglected during the turbulent years of his marriage. One of these was a fellow Marine veteran, a man named Marcus, who now ran a nonprofit that built homes for disabled vets. Liam, hearing about the project, immediately volunteered his firm's services pro bono. He threw himself into designing accessible, beautiful, and dignified homes for men and women who had sacrificed for their country. The work was deeply fulfilling, a way of using his unique skills to serve the community he truly belonged to. It was a purpose far more profound than designing luxury condos for wealthy clients. One afternoon, while visiting a construction site for one of these veteran homes, he saw a familiar figure. It was Catherine Albright, his lawyer, wearing a hard hat and a practical pantsuit, reviewing some paperwork with the site foreman. "Catherine," he said surprised, "what are you doing here?" She turned, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "My firm does the legal work for Marcus's foundation," she explained. "Pro bono, of course. I like to get out of the office and see the good we're actually doing in the world. It's a nice change from dismantling messy divorces." They fell into easy conversation, walking the site together, their talk a mix of architectural details and legal practicalities. Liam found himself admiring her sharp intellect, her dry wit, and her deep-seated sense of justice. She saw the world with the same clear-eyed pragmatism that he did. She understood structure, foundations, and the importance of building things to last. "You know," she said, pausing to look at him, "I've handled hundreds of cases like yours, but I've never seen one play out quite like that. The way you controlled the narrative, the way you used their own arrogance against them. It was a masterclass in strategy." "It wasn't about strategy," Liam said, shaking his head. "It was about truth. I just created a venue where the truth could be heard without interruption." "The truth is rarely enough," she countered. "It needs a good advocate. And sometimes," she added, a twinkle in her eye, "it needs a Marine to make sure everyone is paying attention." They both laughed. It was an easy, comfortable sound. In the shared understanding of that moment, Liam felt the first stirrings of a new foundation being laid. One built not on a whirlwind romance, but on mutual respect, shared values, and the quiet, powerful bond of two people who understood the difference between what is loud and what is strong. As for Sarah and Trevor, their stories concluded not with a dramatic bang, but with a slow, pathetic fade into obscurity. Sarah, unable to find a job that could support the lifestyle she felt she was owed, eventually took a position as a receptionist at a dental office. She lived a quiet life of regret, a constant disappointment to her parents, and a cautionary tale to her friends. She would sometimes drive past the house Liam had built, the house that should have been hers, and feel a pang of loss so profound it was a physical ache. She had stood on solid ground and chosen to leap into an abyss. Trevor's dojo closed for good within a year. He was last seen working as a bouncer at a second-rate nightclub, his muscular frame now a tool for hire, his champion days a distant, bitter memory. He was a caricature of the man he had pretended to be, his life a testament to the fact that arrogance is a hollow currency. Liam's life, in contrast, continued to build, layer upon layer. His firm flourished. His work with the Veterans Foundation won national acclaim. His friendship with Catherine deepened into a quiet, steady partnership, a relationship built on the bedrock of shared principles. One evening, they were sitting in the great room of his house, the fireplace crackling, the lights of the city twinkling in the distance. They were reviewing the plans for a new community center for veterans. "You know," Liam said, looking around the room, "a man once told me this house was sterile, that it needed more energy, more life." Catherine looked at him, her eyes soft in the firelight. "He was wrong," she said. "He didn't understand the difference between noise and harmony. This house has life. It has integrity. It was just waiting for the right people to live in it." And in that quiet moment, Liam knew he was finally, truly home. The past was a closed chapter, a story of a battle fought and won, not with fists, but with patience, preparation, and an unwavering belief in his own worth. The ultimate victory wasn't the downfall of his enemies. It was the peaceful, meaningful life he had built in the aftermath. It was a structure built to last. True strength is rarely loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It is quiet, patient, and prepared. It's the architect who knows the foundation is solid, the veteran who knows the cost of conflict, the person who meets arrogance not with anger, but with unshakable truth. In the end, respect is not something you can demand or fight for in a ring. It's something you earn by the integrity of your character and the quiet dignity with which you live your life. What did you think of Liam's approach? Was it justice or was it revenge? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective makes this community what it is. And if you found this story of quiet triumph satisfying, please give it a like and subscribe for more content just like this. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.